I grew up watching a steady stream of Westerns, movies and TV shows like Hopalong Cassidy, Roy Rogers, and The Lone Ranger. As a child, most of it seemed pretty boring, but I learned that whenever someone said, I don't want any trouble, that there was always going to be a fight. That was more interesting. In the 18th chapter of First Kings, there was just such a showdown that began in much the same way. Basically, Elijah told Obadiah to go and tell Ahab the king that he was coming for him. When Ahab saw Elijah, he said to him, Is that you, you troubler of Israel? I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Baal was a Canaanite fertility god associated with storms and rain. To follow the Baals involved rituals that included idolatry and immorality. In other words, following the Baals was more fun than following Yahweh. Their worship of Baal was a form of syncretism that was actually quite common at the time. Most people were okay with this arrangement. Elijah, not so much. Summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, he told Ahab, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Elijah told the king. And the king, probably thinking to himself that 850 to 1 were pretty good odds, said, Sure, why not? When the day finally came, Elijah went before the people and said, How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people said nothing. They liked the way things were. And Elijah really was not all that popular. Now it was time for the showdown. The task for Elijah was to help them see that they really needed to make a choice now, and it needed to be the right one. 2 altars were set up. The wood was gathered by the 400 plus prophets of Baal to make a burnt offering. The sacrifice was prepared and laid upon the altar. Then Elijah laid down the challenge. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. Baal, answer us, they shouted, and then they danced around the altar that they had made, but nothing happened. They shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, and still nothing. Clearly, this wasn't going to work, and that was not their fault. That was just how things were usually done, not this way. What did people really expect to happen? Then Elijah said to all the people, Now come here to me. He too had set up an altar where there had once been one dedicated to Yahweh. He dug a trench around it. He laid the wood and prepared the sacrifice. But then he said to them, Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. When they had done so, he said, Do it again. And they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At this point, no one could have lit that fire, and everyone was wondering what on earth Elijah was doing. Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. Elijah won the day, and the rains returned to refresh the parched earth. His confrontation with evil had been spectacular and conclusive, but it had not really eliminated the cause of the problem. Jezebel soon had him running for his life. This is the problem with simply confronting evil by causing trouble. it usually brings trouble to you also. True, there is a long line of those who have made this choice to resist evil in just this way. And for the people of God, sometimes that really seems like the only choice, whenever the status quo seems to perpetuate harm. Harriet Tubman chose to defy laws that upheld slavery. Dietrich Bonhoeffer chose to oppose the Nazis. Rosa Parks caused trouble that sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, challenging institutional racism. History indeed shows that resisting evil often requires disrupting harmful systems, even at great personal cost. And without people who are willing to cause trouble in this way, even at such great personal risk, oppression tends to persist unchecked. To cause trouble in this sense, therefore, means standing up against injustice, exposing corruption, and refusing to comply with immoral systems. This is what is sometimes called holy defiance. However, honestly, in spite of battles that are sometimes won this way, that is not really the way to win a holy war. History is also full of examples where such resistance efforts failed, precisely because they chose the wrong approach, either too confrontational when subtlety was needed, or too passive when bold action was required. The key is knowing which is needed when. Elijah's confrontation with the prophets of Baal was a dramatic success in the immediate time. He proved his point, leading the people to declare the Lord, he is God. The false prophets were defeated. However, his victory was short-lived. In the long term, Israel's spiritual decline continued, and Jezebel's influence remained strong. Elijah's victory was real but incomplete, because lasting change isn't just about winning a battle. It's about ensuring a victory over evil, one that reshapes institutions, laws, and societal norms. Short-term thinking often results in symbolic victories without structural change. Therefore, successful resistance movements have a long-term vision, set clear goals, and maintain pressure on the powers that be. That is why the civil rights movement in the United States transitioned from mass protest to legal advocacy, embedding change through laws like the Voting Rights Act. All of the most successful movements have followed this approach. In many ways, Elisha, who took up the mantle literally when Elijah was gone, was actually more successful than Elijah. Elisha was gentler and more rational in his interactions with others. His leadership style was characterized by compassion and his desire to help all those in need. And it was through his efforts and guidance that God truly triumphed over the house of Ahab at last, and the idols were completely destroyed. I think this latter approach, therefore, more clearly describes the role the church needs to take in our modern society. We need to know who we are as the children of God, and we need to be that. We must resolve to serve the one true God only, and not be what James called double-minded, blown and tossed by the wind. We must fulfill our mandate to resist evil and injustice in whatever forms they present themselves. But like everything else we do, that we must also be characterized by true compassion and a desire to help all those who are in need. Those legendary Hollywood cowboys knew that. They were all about good versus evil, fighting against injustice, and protecting the innocent. That's probably why I like them. It was always easy to tell the heroes apart from the bad guys, too. Distinguishing good from evil today is harder than that, and deciding the best way to resist evil is hard, too. Jesus showed us that the true nature of God is love. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, Jesus said. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Therefore, that must be our nature too. Maybe we need to be troublemakers sometimes, but we must always be those who follow Jesus. We must be willing to love even our enemies and willing to pray for them. So, my dear children of God, continue to resist evil. Cause trouble when you have to, but resist as well the impulse to call down holy fire even when you can. Try it the other way instead. Don't just cause a scene that will be ignored and soon forgotten. Instead, change the world by being more Christ-like. If you do that, then you won't just win a battle, and you might just win the war. Be safe, and God bless you.